President Trump is now one of the almost 35 million reported COVID cases worldwide. CBS News senior foreign correspondent Elizabeth Palmer reports from London on how other world leaders are handling the crisis.
Good morning. When the news broke that President Trump had COVID, European leaders sent their good wishes, of course, and then almost immediately doubled down on their own precautions.
At a summit in Brussels, Germany's Angela Merkel ended up doing some anti-COVID kabuki with Italy's prime minister when he got too close. No one has forgotten what happened to the UK's Boris Johnson. Famously casual at the start of the pandemic,
I shook hands with everybody, you'll be pleased to know, and I continue to shake hands.
He caught COVID in March and almost died. Johnson's back at work now, but colleagues say he still suffers fatigue and shortness of breath. Another famous COVID scoffer was Brazil's Jair Bolsonaro. He refused to wear a mask and called people self-isolating cowards. Bolsonaro caught the virus in July. It was a mild case, though, and he was soon back at work with higher approval ratings, in spite of COVID tipping Brazil into recession. It's also one of the three countries worst hit by the pandemic after the U.S. and India, which now leads the way, both in new infections and the number of dead. There's been a dramatic rise in cases in Russia, too, even though scientists there claim their Sputnik V vaccine works. Volunteers may be getting it, but not Vladimir Putin. He's taking no chances. He barely goes out. And though recent military drills were a rare exception, anyone who wants to meet him has to quarantine for 2 weeks and then go through a special disinfection booth.
Here in London, we've just heard from Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who warned Britons that things were going to be what he called bumpy right through Christmas. And from one who's been there, he also said that he thought President Trump was going to be just fine. Margaret?
Liz Palmer in London. Thank you. We turn now to former FDA Commissioner Dr. Scott Gottlieb, who joins us from Westport, Connecticut. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Last night, the president released a video of himself at Walter Reed. He spoke for about 4 minutes. He was able to get through it without being winded. He did sound a little bit hoarse. Given what's been disclosed publicly at this point, what do you think his status is?
It's hard to know. I wouldn't draw too many conclusions from that video. He did look good in the video. This is early on in the course of his illness, so he's not out of the woods. Typically what we see is in the first week you have sort of the viral response phase of the infection, and it's that second week when patients sometimes get into trouble. Now, there is some correlation with patients doing well that first week and being less likely to get into trouble that second week when you have that inflammatory response, the post-viral inflammatory response. But there are exceptions, and I have talked to physicians who've seen patients who did well the first week and still got into trouble. So I think we need to continue to be cautious here with the president and wish him the best.
The National Security Advisor, Robert O'Brien, indicated that, the days ahead could be tough, day 7. That is the course of the virus itself. What do we know about exactly where the president is in the course of his treatment and the disease?
So again, it's hard to know based on the information that they've disclosed. It sounds like he might have become symptomatic on Wednesday. And so the president probably became infected sometime on Friday or Saturday at one of the events that he was at. And people are focusing on this Supreme Court event on Saturday. It could have been 2 introductions here. So the first generation of spread could have been either on Friday or Saturday or both. And then now we're seeing these are second generation cases. The president, Hope Hicks, the first lady. We're going to start to see third-generation cases probably appear maybe Sunday, maybe today, and maybe early this week. People who are infected by the people who are currently diagnosed. So the president does appear to be, about 3 to 4 days into sort of a symptomatic phase right now, if you believe he became symptomatic on Wednesday. So he still has time to go until I think he's out of the woods.
The CDC is not conducting the contact tracing. Washington, D.C. is not. The National Security Advisor said the White House was doing it, but that he was unable to pinpoint the source of the infection. How important is it to pin that down?
Look, I think they have an obligation. This is the President of the United States. This was a gathering of high-level officials. I think they have an obligation to understand how the infection was introduced into that environment. They might not be able to pinpoint it, but they should be very aggressive in a forensic analysis right now to try to find what the source of the infection was and see who brought it into that environment. And that's going to be important also to understand who else could be at risk. Are there any people who came out of that event who could be asymptomatic right now and should go get tested to make sure they're not continuing to spread it to other officials? There doesn't seem to be a very concerted effort underway. I've talked to a number of officials who were at that event on Saturday, and a lot of focus is around that event as one of the potential places where the introduction was made, and they haven't been called yet by contact tracers. So that's concerning.
That is concerning because that suggests potential further spread. Speaker Pelosi mentioned she had concerns about the type of testing that had been used at the White House. You warned on this program back on May 10th that the Abbott Labs test that the White House was relying on was not sufficient to detect asymptomatic spread of COVID-19. Is it a matter of technology? Why did the procedures fail?
Well, look, the Abbott test is a very good test when used appropriately. You have to fit the right test to the right purpose. The White House was relying almost solely on testing as a way to protect the president. They needed a zero-fail testing protocol because they weren't taking any precautions beyond testing people who are going to be in contact with the president. And that requires multiple layers of testing. If you want something close to a zero-fail testing protocol, and you're never going to be able to achieve 100%, you would probably be needing to use a PCR-based test at the point of entry at the White House, so the Cepheid gene expert probably would be more fit to purpose. But frankly, you'd need double layers of testing. You'd probably want to test people before they depart for the White House and then test them again when they arrive. And even that wouldn't be 100%, but it would get you closer. Using these kinds of tests, and they're now using the Binax as well, the antigen-based tests, and the Abbott ID now, using that to screen an asymptomatic population to try to detect virus, you might only have 50% sensitivity, perhaps a little bit better than that.
And who makes that call?
But you're going to let through some people who are infected.
Who makes that call?
Well, I think it was the White House physician. I know that concerns about the testing machines that were being used were raised to the White House at various points. I think the White House physician weighed in on that. I don't know who else weighed in on that, but I think they need to reassess those protocols. Frankly, you shouldn't just be relying on testing alone. You should be taking other steps on the compound. And the other thing to remember is the only people who are getting routinely tested were people who are going to be around the president. So staff was not getting routinely tested. So it's possible to get the virus onto the compound. And then from there, you could have an outbreak within the White House compound.
Some members of the president's inner circle, as you said, may still be at risk. The vice president, is he in the clear yet?
Anyone who was with the president on Tuesday, Wednesday, is not in the clear. I mean, anyone who was with any of the people who are currently infected earlier this week, they were probably at their peak contagion at that point. So typically you're most contagious about 24 hours before the onset of symptoms. So the debate prep on Tuesday is a source of potential third-generation spread. The meeting of the GOP, the Senate GOP on Wednesday, is a source of third-generation spread. We'll likely see more cases emerge, unfortunately, early this week from the people who are currently infected who went on to infect other people. So this is still very much an evolving situation. Now, look, we hope not. And there are situations where there is no further propagation, but it's more than likely that you will see additional cases of third-generation spread.
We will continue to update the public. Dr. Gottlieb, thanks as always for your insight. We'll be right back. LabCorp was the first commercial lab to offer COVID-19 diagnostic testing in March. CEO Adam Schechter joins us this morning from New Hope, Pennsylvania. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Margaret. Thanks for having me here today.
Sure. We heard that the president reportedly did take a PCR test, that kind of gold standard test to confirm his initial diagnosis. How reliable are the different testing platforms that we're talking about?
Sure. There's really three types of tests. There's the PCR test, as you mentioned. That test, it searches for the genetic material of the virus. It's seen as the gold standard. But it does take time to get the results for that test. When we receive a test, it takes us about 24 hours on average to return the results. The second test is an antigen test. That test you can do typically without machinery, and that test looks for a protein on the surface of the virus. It's less accurate than the PCR test, but it's certainly a good test for surveillance and trying to understand where the disease is. And the third type of test is an antibody test, which is a blood test. The first two are nasal swabs typically. The blood test searches for antibodies in your blood. That tells you if you've had the virus in the past.
Is the kind of tool that the White House was using, these rapid tests, is that sufficient to detect the virus in asymptomatic people, in your view?
Yeah, so the type of test that the White House was using, the Abbott test, is a PCR test, but it's not running as many iterations as the PCR test that we run. I think it's an acceptable test to try to screen for people, but it is certainly not sufficient. There's no doubt that people should continue to wear masks, socially distance, practice good hygiene, even if they have a negative result from that test.
So for LabCorp, you said that you can turn around a test within 24 hours. But as the country well knows, you know, this summer, during that uptick in particular in July, there were backlogs for far longer than that. What do you need to do to avoid those backlogs as we get into the fall and winter?
Yeah, we've been building capacity since March of last year. We started from scratch. We were able to do 2,000 to 3,000 tests per day. We can now do over 200,000 tests per day. On average, we're receiving about 100,000 samples per day, so we have additional capacity, but we're not stopping there. We're building more and more capacity. At the same time, we need people to do their part as we go into flu season, get flu vaccinations, socially distance, wear masks, practice good hygiene. I believe that we are all preparing for that season. We also launched a combined test where you can test with one nasal swab, a combination of flu, RSV, and also COVID.
But as you say, you're hoping to stay ahead of the curve this time. The testing companies like yours receive about $100 per test from the current government program. If your company can't turn around results in 2 days, which is what Dr. Fauci says is necessary to actually be useful, why should your company be paid?
So we are doing everything we can to turn around those results as fast as possible. Every one of our 65,000 LabCorp employees around the world are working day and night. Our labs are open 7 days a week, running 24 hours a day. There's no reimbursement that's going to cause us to move faster than we can. We want to move as fast as we possibly can. These are our friends, our families, our neighbors. So we're doing everything to have the best turnaround as possible. But I would say that as the turnaround time is longer, the usefulness of the tests, particularly for tracking and tracing, is less. There's no doubt about it. But I disagree that it's useless after 2 days, because if you find out in 3 days that you don't have the virus and you're feeling better and can go back to work, that's better than having to quarantine for 10 days.
Right. Well, as we've learned, some people, including lawmakers, are not quarantining, even though they are taking tests at the same time. So are you saying clearly that LabCorp does not anticipate a backlog if we see infections continue to rise in the U.S.? Can you avoid what happened this summer?
Right now, so we are building capacity every single day. We're at 200,000 tests a day right now, and we will not stop. We are buying every machine we can, getting as much reagent as we can, doing everything we can to prepare for the flu season. But I really do encourage people to help us by getting the flu shot, by practicing social distancing. Masks work. We know they work. So if we do all those things, I think we're going to be in a good position going into the flu season.
All right, Mr. Schechter, thank you very much. We will be back in a moment with some thoughts from voters across the country. One of our favorite ways to talk to voters in an election year is through a focus group. And this year, like millions of other Americans, we're talking on Zoom. Friday night, we spoke with 3 Biden supporters and 3 Trump supporters about the president's diagnosis.
It's probably an eye-opener for him.
What do you mean an eye-opener for him?
Sometimes I wonder whether, enough people take the virus seriously, I guess.
And you think he hasn't?
I'm a mask believer. I really believe in masks, and I guess I wish masks were, from the get-go, we were all suggested to use it.
Thomas, you're out in Ohio. I know you were also a supporter of the president.
When I heard that he had coronavirus, I guess I wasn't surprised. I've always thought from the beginning of this pandemic that we'd all end up being exposed to it at some point.
Jill, you live in Houston, Texas, and in that area, masks did become a big political battle.
I wasn't surprised because I'm in the healthcare field. I know the importance of being protected. And I was really surprised that he ever thought it was okay to not wear a mask, or that he ever even encouraged people not to. It was concerning to me, so I can't say that I was surprised when I found out.
JR, you're in Georgia, where this also became heavily politicized.
Well, I'm a firm believer in karma. I just am. The president just has never taken this seriously. He said that he has the best genes. He's going to be the healthiest president. There's no evidence of that. I mean, just by his physical appearance. And I'm saddened that he's in the hospital right now. I really am. But I mean, this is of his own doing. And he should have taken every precaution because he knew about it before we did. And he didn't tell us.
You were a Trump supporter.
Oh, no, I'm no longer. I try to give him a chance. I mean, but our country is in peril at this. We're at our knees. And people are not taking this seriously. I mean, it sounds like a whole different country. It not only sounds like the United States, it sounds like some other country. And we're going through all of this. It's so sad.
It is sobering news today. Lori, you live outside Nashville, Tennessee. When it comes to the president's health, are you trusting the news you're receiving?
Yeah, I don't have any reason to believe that we're not being told the truth about that. I also think, at least in my own circles, people I know and care about, I know some people who this didn't start to hit home for them until someone they know and loved contracted it themselves. And so that may be the case here, that just seeing someone prominent who has it may change the way you feel about the public health recommendations. I hope that it will.
Can I see a show of hands from those of you who believe that the news of the president's illness will affect the presidential campaign? Will it affect votes? Jill, why do you think this will affect votes?
Knowing that he now has the virus, and all the people that maybe went out and supported him, that maybe went to rallies and did things and didn't wear masks, maybe they feel a little betrayed. So it may affect a few people.
Juan, do you feel you've been misled?
Not in the least bit. He told us from the beginning. He tried to be positive, but he never lied to us. He said people are dying. China lied, people died. Bad things happen. It's a horrible, horrible virus. My wife's uncle's wife died way at the very beginning in March. So we knew it was serious. And I don't think he ever lied to us. He was trying to pump us up and try to keep us positive while the experts are giving you the nuts and bolts of what was going on.
CBS has been doing a lot of research and polling. And one of our recent polls showed that a majority of Republicans, 57%, told us that the death count from COVID-19 is an acceptable number. Tom, are you one of the Republicans who thinks that the current death count is acceptable?
I do think it's acceptable. When we were faced with the initial estimates of anywhere from 2 to 4 million people dying in this pandemic.
Where did you hear those estimates?
That was the start when everything started percolating when it came to the virus. I mean, the news was very dire out of China when they started, but I think that we had very little information to go on. And so was it a desperate situation? Well, it wasn't presented to us that way. The worst case scenario was anywhere from 2 to 4 million people dying with this pandemic. Well, you're talking a country of almost 350 million people here, okay? And so 200,000, it's too many. Yes, it's too many. But when you start thinking about what could have been and what the initial estimates for the percentage of people that would die with this virus, I think our healthcare workers did an incredible job helping people here. And so, hats off to them because they really stepped up and took care of people, and the therapeutics have helped.
And I should have mentioned that you are in Ohio. where you say you are seeing a lower number right now. Will all of you get a vaccine? How many of you will get a vaccine when it is approved by the FDA? Jill, you're a healthcare worker. You're not going to get a vaccine?
Absolutely not, because until it is done properly and tested properly and all the proper research is done, I am not going to be a guinea pig. Because basically that's what they're going to be doing, because by rushing it and by trying to, say, okay, we've got the vaccine, everything's back to normal, all they're doing is they're going to be testing it on humans, and I will not be a human test dummy.
JR, I understand that you lost a number of family members to COVID-19.
Oh, yeah, I actually have someone who's in our hospital now.
Well, given that and what you know, why wouldn't you go for a vaccine?
Well, y'all heard of the Tuskegee experiment, right? And I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist person, but I'm reluctant to put anything in my body that I don't know what it is.
What would change your mind? What would make you believe it's safe?
290 million people took it and they were fine.
Jill, you were shaking your head yes when JR said he was skeptical, and he specifically mentioned the Tuskegee experiments.
Yes. I mean, you have to admit that, we have a right to kind of feel that way after what was done during that experiment. And who's to say anybody would be fair to us now,
when you say us, when you say us, you mean specifically African Americans.
Yeah. And I'm not a person that normally thinks that way, but when I look at everything going on in the world now and all the racial divide and everything, it just makes me a little bit less trusting.
I agree with Jill, exactly the same. I just feel like, African Americans, people of color, at first thought that, hey, we weren't going to get this disease. And now we're finding that, hey, we're one of the essential targets of this disease, and we're bearing the brunt of this disease. I literally have people who have died from this disease that I know, and someone's in intensive care right now, and my heart's breaking. So for me to take this vaccine that they going to push out faster than anything that I've ever heard of, they still haven't found a vaccine for AIDS. And how you gonna put out a vaccine in less than a year? That it really just, I cannot understand that. It doesn't compute in my mind. I'm sorry.
And you can see a lot more of our conversation with the focus group on our website at facethenation.com. We'll be right back. A new CBS News documentary looks at the effect of the virus on Asian Americans in the U.S. It is called Asian Americans Battling Bias, and it will air this Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on CBSN, CBS News' 24/7 streaming service. To watch it, download the free CBS News app. That's it for us today. Thank you all for watching. For Face the Nation, I'm Margaret Brennan.